Welcome back to the Intentional Parents Podcast. You're not broken, but you are patterned. And that is something that we want to talk about today. We want to talk about Romans 7, that wonderful dynamic when we do what we don't want to do, we end up doing it anyway. That crazy dynamic. We want to talk about why we react this way, how we can heal from it, and really what are the beginning steps to not just feel like we're a broken person, but understand our patterns and how God wants to redeem that, restore it, help our marriages, help our parenting in a deep way. Thank you for everyone that is rated, subscribed, and also just left comments for the podcast. It helps immensely. If this is a gift to you, this free resource, please just, one of the ways to say thank you is to just simply rate or subscribe to the podcast, leave a comment on Apple, Spotify, wherever you like to listen, and go over to YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. You can go check that out. Subscribe to that. If you'd like to watch these episodes, you'll notice today that Elizabeth and I both unintentionally dressed like we're going to a funeral. All black today. Like she walks into the studio, I was like, and she hates you hate when we match.
Yeah, there's enough contrast. You're wearing a hat.
Yeah.
Well, I hate when we match like too closely.
There's lots of fights about that.
After this long of being together, happens more than you
It can happen. It can happen. But today, as this podcast comes out, so we hate to timestamp these podcasts, but there's a very important week. So you might be listening to this past this moment in time, and that's okay. But anyone that's listening to this in real time or within the next few days of the releasing of this podcast, we are right in the week of Father's Day, 2025. We're very excited about it. And this is a very important day, specifically because we are going to June 13th, this coming Friday. Again, you might be past the time listening to this, but Friday, June 13th, we are officially launching Intentional Fatherhood. Woohoo! I think this is where, did you just say, ooh, that was the most underrated? I'm excited.
That's where we need like the applause sound
Miles,
effects.
would we be able to just add applause right here? Okay, great. All that applause, you heard it all there. It should have been just overdubbed in, people clapping. We are really excited about this. So a really cool, quick story. We partnered with Justin Whitmel early, a wonderful friend, a wonderful author, a wonderful communicator, a wonderful human. He's written a wonderful book called Habits of the Household, The Common Rule, Made for People. These are some of his books. He's writing a wonderful new book I can't even tell you about, which I'm so excited for when it gets out in the world. But we partnered up and have just been praying through how do we help fathers, and him and I just had a synergy and a desire to just go at this together. And so you can go over to Intentional Fatherhood right now on any platform that you listen to. It's its whole own podcast, and please subscribe because we're going to be dropping new content every week. And also, if you listen to it and it's helpful, rate it. That would be super helpful. And tell all your friends about it. If you are a wife listening to this, and you're like, oh my gosh, I've been waiting for a resource specifically for my husband. We are releasing that this coming Friday. Maybe you're listening to this and it's already out and you can just go listen to the first episode. But we are like very, very, very excited. Fatherhood is really challenging in many ways. And we don't actually come at this, and Elizabeth can attest, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. But just the last thing on it is, we don't come at this idea of fatherhood from a place of domineering strength. Like we know what we're talking about. In fact, Justin and I very much want to admit, and even so you can hear right now, this is not a shame-based problem-solving fatherhood initiative podcast or resource. It is a place where we come with all of our weaknesses, our vulnerabilities, and honestly say, how do we do this really well from a place of challenge and from a place of our own insecurities? We don't fluff anything up. We actually share so much of our own stories, vices, struggles, challenges as fathers, both things that we've dealt with personally, but also things that we've come across that have been harmful and things that have also been helpful. And so we have some very honest conversations on there. And hopefully it will motivate you to create that community and continue to have those conversations. But Intentional Fatherhood, check that out. You can go to our Instagram handle at Intentional Fatherhood. And then there's just a little underscore underneath it at the end. It's the only one that wasn't taken. So follow us on social media and we're going to be releasing stuff. But that's happening. We're so excited. It's going to be great. What are your thoughts other than
so good?
Yeah. What are your other thoughts?
No, I think you said it all really well, but I think it's so true. What I love about the partnership with Justin and just the tone you guys are striking and really just the heart you have is to, it makes me think of the like, follow me as I follow Christ. Like not in a like, follow me, I've got it all right. Like a, hey, I'm learning to do this in a messy way, in the realness of it all. And come on, let's do it together. And I think that's a necessary tone for anybody. But I think especially in the fatherhood world, we don't need more like pedestal type examples or people telling us a formulaic way of doing something. You say this a lot. We just need more models and ideas and camaraderie, you know?
All do, yeah.
And I think that was the thing you and I so appreciated when we met Justin was we got to hear him speak. We'd read his book, and we got to hear him speak, and then we met him, and it was just like, okay, you are in the trenches living this right now. And you teach from that heart posture of humility and of mess and of brokenness. And I think we all exhale a little bit when we hear those types of stories. So I'm just so excited about what you guys are doing. And I know behind the curtain, I know you're doing it with some fear and trembling of this is not like this is your greatest area of strength and you get to tell everybody how to do it. You have been humbled in the journey of fatherhood. I have been humbled in the journey of motherhood. And
yes.
And I love that you're sharing from a place of weakness, really, because I think there's a lot of, I think that's very biblical. When I mean, in the words that were given to Paul of in his weakness, that's where Christ is strong, you know? And so I'm just proud of you and excited.
Thank you. I'm excited too. I really am. I think it will be really fun. And, this was one of the resources that so many of you have been asking about for a long time. And those two things are not exaggerated. Some people say everyone's been asking, and really no one's been asking. We have had a lot of of people asking through different mediums, whether that's social media, email, in person. When are we going to do something for fathers? And it's taking the right people in the right time, but we really feel excited about jumping into this. And also, go to intentionalfatherhood.org, whole website. You can learn more about that. We don't have events yet. People are asking.
I was just going to say, why don't you save yourself lots of emails and messages?
Yes.
Will there be a fatherhood retreat? Brooke Moser.
There will be an intentional fatherhood retreat. We will have events, but we are still waiting to see if people listen. So if you want an event, tune in. That will help us know if we can actually do some of these events. And yes, we would love to. We'd love to gather a group of men and pray together and learn together and experience life together. So that is a main goal that we are just really excited to pull the trigger on when the time is right. And it won't be too far in the future, but obviously we're just starting right now at Father's Day. So go to intentionalfatherhood.org, And one other thing, if you're listening and you didn't know, we also have a whole arm for mothers and our Intentional Motherhood Retreat, which is coming up in October in Portland, the 23rd through the 25th. I think those are the dates, I hope.
Somewhere around there.
Off the top. Yeah, but sign up for that. If you don't have tickets for that, go get those. Our event in Portland, last year we had 800 ladies come out to Bend. Now we're going to be doing it in Portland just to have more venue space. We've had so many wonderful folks tell us like there's not enough room, and we have listened. So we have a space that's a little bit bigger, not much, but bigger than our last ones. And so that's been really exciting. And we have some new events there. And then also those have been asking about the intentional marriage retreats that we've had. And also those events, stay tuned because we are praying and planning through that. So if you're a mom, if you're a dad, there's some stuff. If you're parents, there's some stuff. If you're married, there's some stuff. That's really the mission that we are trying to fulfill is how do we help families as a whole in their individual roles, but collectively grow in the way of Jesus and become more like him. And how do we do that? Not through our great strengths, but through our weaknesses and through our shaping, which brings us perfectly to the fact that you are not broken, you're patterned. And I know we said this about 10 minutes ago at this point, but I think there's a lot of, I just want to highlight to frame this episode really briefly on the reality that so many of us operate from a place of shame. Feeling like when we have those big responses, we are yelling or our anger flares up again and you swore you wouldn't act this way. And these things come up in you or your spouse or your children, maybe you would say provoke you, but they bring something up and it presents this pattern in you. it's easy to begin to feel like I'm broken. I like really want to change this, and I really don't want to act this way. I really don't want to hurt my kids. I really don't want to be this kind of spouse, but I am being all of those things. I really think it's important for you to hear this truth. You're not broken. You are patterned. And that idea, Dr. Dan Allender, I love him. He says, we don't think our way into behavior. We live our way into new thinking. And that's primarily through story. We think our way, and that's so true. We think our way into new behavior. We live our way into new thinking. And so the beauty of this conversation is you're not broken, your pattern. Patterns can be undone and they can be relearned. And for just some context to understand, like, wow, where does this show up practically? Is this a foundational truth? Is this just some psychological stuff that just feels nice? This is literally Romans 7 to a T. I think you have it pulled up. Do you mind just reading that for context? Because I think that sets up our whole conversation of like our marriage interactions and parental interactions potentially on a day-to-day basis if you're anything like me.
Yeah, so there's so much here. I'll read a good portion of it because it just feels so fitting to just really the different parts of us that often are contradicting each other. Romans 7, starting in verse 14, says, "We know that the law is spiritual, but I am unspiritual, sold as a slave to sin." And this is so good. "I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate, I do. And if I do what I do not want to do, I agree that the law is good. As it is no longer I myself who do it, but it is the sin living in me. For I know the good itself does not dwell in me, that is, in my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out." And then skipping down a few verses, verse 22, "For in my inner being I delight in God's law, but I see another law at work in me, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin at work within me." And then verse 25, "Thanks be to God who delivers me through Christ Jesus our Lord." And it's just that reality of like, we have as hopefully good-willed, good-natured in some ways, people and parents and spouses, we have this desire to show up for the people we love most in a really meaningful, beautiful, healthy way. We have this desire to show up to our relationship with God, humble and ready to receive and teachable and in partnership with Him. We have that in us. And then we have these other parts of us that react really poorly when somebody's mad or when somebody's rude, or stomp on our teenagers when they're disrespectful. Stomp emotionally, not physically. That react to our spouse when there's tension, or shut down completely and wall up and shut people out, or whatever it might be, whatever your go-tos or patterns are. We have those parts of us too. And yet somehow they're all deeply woven, both of those parts, deeply woven into how we operate. I don't even want to say fully who we are, but how we've learned to operate.
We learned patterns. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. And so sometimes it can be just this mystery where we see this cognitive dissonance of like, here's who I want to be. And there's times when I am like that. And then here's all these times when I'm not like that. And how do I get from where I want to be and where I feel like the Spirit is leading me and things I know are the way of Jesus? How do I get from where I am to where I want to be? What do I do when I hit a bump in the road where I'm not able to live into who I know God's asking me to be as a parent, as a spouse? What do we do with all of that?
Yeah. Maybe even what do we do with all of it? And maybe even to just even a little bit more clarity, to go just a little bit beneath the surfaces, when you actually are talking about whenever we overreact, whenever we shut down, whenever we explode, well, why is that happening? Like what's really going on under the surface? And why does healing actually start not with shame, but actually with your story? It actually starts with that. So much of this has impacted me recently. So I know we have talked about some of this before, but I just feel like there is so much transformational power and truth in Jesus helping you see your story through his eyes and the lens of his, and that's not just like feel good talk. That is like when we slow down enough to say, God, where are the redemption parts of my story? Maybe I'm not broken, but maybe I've learned certain patterns. So a question that might come up for a lot of people is, well, why do I even react this way? Reactivity for you and for me specifically, more me than even you, I would say personally, but just I think in general, is actually reactivity that is like patterned behavior that is rooted in past pain. And so if you think about it, anger is actually, if you remember, a secondary emotion because it protects these deeper feelings like fear or shame or powerlessness. So a lot of the time we're angry, but it's not because you're just angry at the person. Like there's usually fear behind it, or there's deeper feelings like shame. I know for me, I get angry when I feel a lot of shame. You know this. Don't overshare. But I definitely feel that way sometimes when I feel shame. I just feel angry. And then I get angry at everyone around me because I feel shame. Now, it's taken 10 years plus to even identify that as a actual activity in my behavior pattern. But again, that pattern has made me feel like I am shame, that idea that you are nothing or worthless. It's made me feel like I'm broken because I can't respond this way. And the healing that has come from me realizing like, wait, this is a pattern, and a pattern can be undone and it can be changed, and it can actually be something that God redoes. James 1:19 through 20, be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry, for human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. I love that verse. It's very helpful in this whole process to remember, like for me, to be quick to listen, to be slowing to speak, slowing to become angry. I don't do that perfectly, but I've been on this journey of like just starting to be aware of these secondary emotions and where they come from and really understanding my story. And I would say that the moment I started looking back into my story and where this has come from and the patterns I've learned was the moment where I was like, there's hope. There's like healing that can come. I don't always have to react this way.
Yeah. I've
What are
heard
you
it
thinking?
said that anger is kind of cheesy, but it'll stick with you. That anger is like a check engine light in a car. It should alert you to there's something that needs tending to. Really, what you're saying, tending to your story, tending to like what's behind that, like uncovering. Oh, I'm actually feeling shame right now. It's coming out as anger.
Yep.
I'm feeling shame. One of our kids' anger. Usually, the thing behind anger is fear or anxiety.
Sure.
And it's different for all of us and different in different times, but like thinking of it like that versus just condemnation. Actually, Mom's reading a great book on like,
Your mom.
my mom.
Yeah. She says
on anger
mom
right now
to me. And then I'm
so,
like, my mom?
And the stuff she shared with me is so good. It's like anger and theology of like, what does the Bible actually teach about anger? So stay tuned for a whole nother episode on anger. Cause it's a big one, but thinking of it as a check engine light of like what needs tending to. There's something below the surface here that needs tending to. And I think even as we talk today, be thinking of yourself and how these things show up in your life. But even our kids, even
especially
at a young
kids.
age, because we live in a fallen world, they are carrying invisible stories already. They are hearing lies because the enemy is the author of lies. He's already sowing those into young children, oftentimes using us to do it.
Yeah.
But our kids are living invisible stories. And so even beginning just regular rhythms and practices where we're asking our kids thoughtful questions and helping them uncover the thing behind the thing, you know, is just really helpful, a helpful framework to have.
So helpful. I love that you said that. So let me just highlight something. We did a whole episode on procedural memory.
Yeah.
Again, so for some of you, you're going to be like, that is like bizarre. I don't get it. That's too therapeutic language. That's okay. I just want to break that down in a way that just makes sense of how it shows up in your life. So again, with that idea, you're not broken, you're patterned. Procedural memory, it's that your body remembers even when your mind doesn't. So that's those weird, crazy reactions that you can have, and you look back and you're like, oh gosh, what happened? Why did I respond that way? Like if we understood how often our childhood wounds often shape how we respond to stress and conflict or even intimacy in adulthood, we would be shocked. Like it is all over the place. And those reactions are actually rehearsed patterns. They're these things that you have like rehearsed your whole life. And they were developed primarily for survival in my situation and many others. Like you learn these patterns because you learn that when you respond this way or act this way or do this thing, it actually is a survival thing to keep you safe. But now what often happens, and this is my story to a T, it often will sabotage connection. So I'm trying to just respond the way that I've been patterned. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to respond this way, not realizing that it's actually sabotaging those I want to be closest with, and it's hurting me. And so an analogy that I think is just a helpful one, it's like if you're learning to play piano with the wrong finger positions, and over time it feels natural, but it's actually really inefficient and it's really limiting. So you just learn and I have some
like it
friends
works, but it doesn't work well.
It doesn't work. I have some friends that, taught themselves piano. They don't know good finger positioning. This is like a real thing in the musician world. And healing for you, it's like relearning where to put your fingers and how to do it so that it's efficient and it's not limiting. It's a gift. It's a blessing to you. And so I think we all have, and a great question to ask ourselves is, what are those emotional finger positions, so to speak, that you've repeated so long that they just feel like your identity? They feel like this is your identity now. It's not your identity, but it feels like it, and you have to relearn that pattern of behavior with the power of the Spirit, which is huge. And that's really where I want to spend our time. We want to spend our time, is that patterns can be healed. And we want to walk through these 4 things of what they look like and where they've been helping us specifically. But your goal isn't to eliminate all your emotions. You need to have those, but you have to integrate your emotions and your story with compassion. You have to have grace on the fact that you have a story, you come from a place, just to bring it into real time. At the marriage retreat, I just was really honest about my story and background, which I'm not going to, go into detail here, but I was really honest about that. And I always find something so intriguing, whether I share my story in public or in private. It always gives people permission to be honest about their story, no matter what the story is, no matter how good, bad, weird, comparable, who has a worse, story or not. It doesn't matter. The point is that the moment you open your life and you're honest about your story, it gives somebody permission to be honest about their story. And I have found in my own life that there's so much healing that happens in me when I share my story, because it gives me more compassion on myself, because people will reflect back and go, that was kind of crazy. And I'll often just say, no, that's just normal. We all do that thing, right? Like where we say, well, my upbringing that's how all parents do it. That's how every family goes about it. And that's not always the case. And so I think it's important wherever you are at in this journey to know that patterns can be healed, and that you have to, again, ask Jesus, help me see my story and how I experience life and the pain I experience through your lens, because his lens is really compassionate and really gracious and really kind. And so I want to walk through these 4. Let's walk through these 4, okay? Patterns can be healed. The first thing that you need to do is name the story. You need to name it. You need to be honest about it. I'd love to talk about that. I've been talking a lot. Do you have any first thoughts on that, sweetheart? I'd love to hear yours. I have a couple just from my own bent, but I'd love to hear yours first.
Yeah. I mean, I think you already, explained some of this, but if you can't name or be able to connect, maybe is another word that could be used there, of maybe deeper reasons why you could be responding so strongly to certain things. And that's even sometimes a good place to start. Where are the areas that I'm responding like this full body response, like nervous system's heightened, like, and start to ask yourself why, like what's happening here? This might be too weird for some people to like therapeutic language, but a lot of therapists will ask like, how old is that memory? Like when really they're trying to get to when was the first time you experienced that? And oftentimes it goes back to when we were kids, and different things that we experienced as kids, or ways that we felt, or the people we were closest to, like how we felt in their presence. But I mean, even sometimes it's not this, we're having this big, huge, destructive, sinful response to our kids or to our spouse. Sometimes it's subtle, like For example. Um,
Where are you going?
well, this is fresh and recent, and I'm working through it currently. We were like teenagers and young adults at like the height of purity culture. I do actually feel like we need to do an episode on this
I know.
at some
We've already
point,
said that
although it will be maybe controversial. I don't know. I hate
I don't
anything
think it'll be
controversial. I hate stepping on toes.
I don't think it's controversial.
And let me be the first to say there was a lot of good that was involved with purity culture. And I actually think some of the good we've discarded, and we don't talk about sexual purity.
Well, we do.
We do.
Our home,
We do, but like
the majority, that's not
as
always
young people, it's
Yeah.
not talked, in my opinion, it's not being talked about enough in the church. And dating and all of that, because we overdid it with purity culture. And we won't go into it fully on this episode, but purity culture was drenched in fear and shame, the bad parts of it. There was a lot of fear and shame and I think burdens rather than really giving young people a framework for God's design for flourishing and for freedom within guardrails and the context of purity, you know? So there was a lot of good with it. I feel like that's important to say, but there was some major backsided weaknesses to things that were just overdone. And then in the context of the time that I was raised in the church, in the context of the home that I was raised in, my dad not coming to the Lord until later in life and really wanting a different story for his kids, there was just a lot of emphasis put on purity. And again, a lot of that was really good.
Phil,
and
you
I'm
can
grateful
defend yourself
for.
next episode.
I mean, please, Dad, if you're listening, please hear me. There was a lot of really good.
Well, there was, but there was. He would also say that there was a lot of stuff that didn't go. That was a hard time.
That was overdone. Well, fast forward, we have a teenager.
Yes.
Who just started dating, and again, don't need to go into all the details of that. And it just even the process of it beginning to be a conversation ignited all sorts of fear in me that I had no idea was there. And so much as a parent, you don't know those things are there until you get to the parenting stage where you now have to relive your own lived experience, but also somehow be present to your kids' experience that is happening right now. And back to Romans 7, I keep seeing in myself, here's how I want to be responding and to be present to my son and to be active in these beautiful conversations that we're having. Because really it is, on one hand, it's been this beautiful process. He's dating a delightful girl. He's handling it incredibly well. He's hyper logical. He's like, it's actually going great. But there's this whole other part of me that is so fearful, that is having to really work through all the stuff it's bringing up in me. But in order to do that, I have two choices. I can just shame myself for not being the parent that I want to be and like, get it together, girl. Why are you feeling anxious? There's no logical reason for you to feel anxious. Or I can, with compassion, ask myself questions. Where is this coming from? Like, what is
your father
going on here?
He'd laugh if he was here.
And then a step further, now what do I need to do to invite God in to speak to me and to heal and to show me what is happening in myself and what happened in my story so that I can show up to my son where he actually is, because that's what I want to do. I don't want to bring
We've had so many fun conversations.
So many. And I'm having to heavily lean on you, who's not, you're handling it great. It's not bringing up a bunch of stuff for you. But I share that, and that's fresh. It's not fully worked through. I
think it's good to share.
Actively trying to work through it right now. But that's just an example. Sometimes it's not this horribly sinful response that we're having.
Or it's not even it's not like a horribly negative story. Like the story of your
I would not call it trauma.
No, like our dating experience it wasn't traumatic, but it also left some things in you that you're like, whoa, it's bringing up things in me now that I have to deal with now that's affecting how I interact with those I love most in a negative way.
Yeah, exactly.
So it doesn't always so naming the story could also just be naming and being like learning, like, where does that even come from? Yeah, I think that's what I hear you saying.
Yeah.
And I would say if it is a traumatic thing, name it. If it's just as simple, and I really like your story because I think it's even like, think about the origin of that whole story that you're sharing. Your parents that were well-meaning people and are well-meaning people decide we want to help our daughter live out purity in her life. So they find different ideas and people to talk to help that happen. Then when you start dating, they share with you certain things and or desire to make sure that you are safe and protected in the arena of dating sexually, but also emotionally and all those things, all good stuff, but had some negative impact on you. And that story is now negatively impacting parts of your parenting. That's a very intriguing detail.
Yeah.
So it doesn't always have to be negative. And I think that's important.
And this is not in the 4 things we're going to give, but blaming is not helpful. Naming is not the same thing as blaming. I think Sally has said that on the podcast before. Good. We don't name so that we can blame the church for purity culture or blame my parents for how they navigated that. Or that's not the point. No. Because they were doing the best that they could with what they had at the time. And again, there was a lot of good that came out of it. Yeah. But now it's my responsibility to notice those things that are coming up in me and to say, okay, they got a lot right. Here's the parts that I don't want to emulate. And how do I do it a little bit better with our kids? And then we're going to miss stuff. And our kids then get to do it a little bit better. They get to do the same thing. But I think that's a really important distinction, that we don't name so that we can blame all the people that hurt us. We name so that we can say, what is my responsibility in my own journey of healing with Jesus? Yeah. How do I step into that?
Yeah, that is a great point. So name the story. That's the first pattern. That's the first step. Begin to name your story. Second, and this is so crucial, and I found in my own personal path, is you have to grieve the loss. You have to grieve the loss of what should have been, but wasn't. We have a lot to say about grief because a lot of our life is, and ongoing grief. Grief has been something that unfortunately we've had to dive deeply into. And I don't say that as like, oh, feel sorry for us. I just mean we are well acquainted with grief. Isaiah 53, all 3. I love this. This is in the New King James Version because the language actually says this so clearly. It says, he is despised and rejected by men. And this is speaking of Jesus. He was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Other versions say well acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. And he was despised, and we did not esteem him. Jesus was rejected. He was a man well acquainted with grief. And I think to maybe just even comfort you, if you're experiencing grief, just to encourage you, you are right in the path that Jesus has been and was in as well. He was really well acquainted with grief. I think it's so important to be people that are well acquainted with grief, that are not so surprised, taken aback, slowed down by, I mean, in some sense you need to. There's times when it just slows you down for sure.
Yeah.
But not to be so alarmed by grief. Grief is a very important part of our life and needs to be. And I think one of the most healing things is learning how to grieve well, which is that's a whole 10 episodes in and of itself. How do we actually grieve loss, disappointment, life not being what we had hoped it to be, maybe ourselves not being who we thought we would be. I think that's a big one a lot of the times, that we have these elevated views of ourselves in our 20s and even 30s of who we think we could be with all the young youth and energy alive in us. And then we hit reality in our mid 30s or 40s and we go, oh yeah, there's just a certain limitation on all of us. And I'm never going to be that crazy version of yourself that you thought you could be, or the super successful version of yourself, or the super fit version of yourself, or the super healthy version of yourself, like wherever you fall on that spectrum. And so you need to grieve the loss what should have been, but wasn't.
Yeah.
As a woman who's well acquainted with grief, give me a thought on this before we move on.
Oh man, I have so many thoughts on this.
I know.
I think there's so much healing power in grief. I know that might sound strange. I think we avoid it because we think it's not going to be healing. And sometimes we avoid it just because it kind of sucks when you are like overpowered by it at times. But really, I think grief and And lament, which is really an expression of that grief to God, really is an act of surrender. And surrender is where we find healing, because we're surrendering ourselves to the one who can heal, regardless of our circumstances, regardless of the limits to our own effort, which is greatly limited. When we can surrender all of that over to God and say, this is just what it is. I think grief is, in many ways, just saying out loud, honestly, what is and where you are right now. And I think God can do a whole lot with that. And I think oftentimes we limit God because we hold those parts of ourselves tightly because we don't want to express it. We don't want to feel it. We're afraid of what might lie there, or we don't want to be a negative person or whatever. And I think we end up limiting, for sure, the intimacy that we can have with God. But I think I've seen that to be huge in your own story of really letting yourself face the grief of just things that happened in your childhood and things that have happened in your story. And I think I've watched you find a lot of freedom there.
In grief? Yeah. A ton. And I also think I had to learn what grief felt like. So for me, it felt like extreme exhaustion. It felt like wanting to overeat. It felt like lethargy. Like these were things I was like, am I something wrong with me? And it was, it took some work, but to figure out like, oh, how grief showed up in my personal emotions was like different than yours. And it was different than a lot of people's. And I just thought like, what's going on? Why is this happening? Around the topic of my dad having cancer and dying. Like that was so challenging because it was such a long form of grief where, that's a slow process. Anyone that has had to struggle and suffer through a loved one dying of cancer, and you see them in all these different stages of slowly dying, essentially. Each new moment and movement is like another layer of grief. It's another layer of sadness. It's another layer of like, whoa. And so, I remember that's when I like came aware of it. But I think there's a lot of moments when we start to understand it, learn it, and not be surprised by it, and invite Jesus into it. So I think you first have to name the story. You have to, that root memory, that origin, maybe the pattern. You have to then, secondly, you have to grieve the loss, what should have been but wasn't. The third thing then you have to do, and this is our story too, it's so clearly and true, is then you have to just begin to invite Jesus into that wound, whatever that is. And again, you highlighted, it doesn't always have to be this like major, massive trauma. Maybe it's little t, maybe it's big T, maybe it's not trauma at all, but inviting Jesus into the moment and the pain that you're in. And I think it's important to just say that restoration and redeeming is relational. It's not just behavioral. It's not just you changing your behavior and now there's healing. It's a relational act each day of unburdening your soul and saying, Jesus, I need help with this. And this really hurts. And this shouldn't have happened. And I'm trying to grieve well, but I'm not doing that well. And I'm trying to name the story, but I'm mad about the story. It's just inviting Jesus in a very active way into what you're doing. And I think there's so many different ways to do that. So I would love to just know really briefly, what are a couple ways that what are your preferences? I know the answer to this, but I think it's important for other people to hear. Like, what are the ways that you invite Jesus into that wound, or what does it look like for you to invite Jesus into the pain points of your life? Just practically, like times and spaces and ways. Yeah.
I have to slow down enough to do it. I'm not one of those people who can access the deeper like feelings super easily. Like for a lot of people, those feelings are very easily accessible. They're at the surface. They're just kind of accessing them all day long. And I tend to escape from feeling them by doing and by working, by being productive. And it's kind of how I cope with like feeling them in manageable doses. And so for me, I have to have space where it's quiet. Nobody else is around. So that's always very early in the morning. It's the only time that's the case. And I have to do it with a journal. When I just start to think and try to pray and try to name and grieve and, all those things, my mind just can be like a squirrel and just be all over the place. And so for me, really, it is, I hadn't even realized this till you started to ask me that question. It really is kind of journaling through this process of coming, whether it's anxious or irritated or angry or sad or whatever gets me there to the journal, and just naming, here's what's happening. Here's what I'm feeling. Here's what happened.
Here's what Brooke did.
Here's what it's bringing up for me.
I know there's entries about that. There's no doubt.
And then just ask, my way of inviting Jesus in is just asking him, what do you want me to know? And oftentimes, and then I just sit in quiet until I hear something. Usually it's a phrase of scripture that will come to mind, or just something that the Spirit will then just kind of lead me on this rabbit trail of what he wants me to know. And sometimes, and I think this is really important, we have to be willing to allow the Holy Spirit to reframe the story. Because sometimes what we're believing is not fully true, whether it's what we're believing about ourselves, where the enemy is just getting us with shame, and asking God, like, what is shame from the enemy, and what is like conviction and guilt from the Holy Spirit, that something needs to be confessed, and helping distinguish those two. Sometimes we are blaming when we're trying to name the story. We're blaming our parents, we're blaming the friend, we're blaming our husband, we're blaming our kids. And allowing the Spirit to like reveal if there's a different story that we're not seeing, allowing him to reveal that. So I think that's what it looks like for me, is like just sitting with my messy journal, with my messy handwriting, I cannot spell to save my life. I hope no one ever reads my journals. But just for me, that helps create the mental space to be able to hear the Spirit, to be able to ask God what he wants to do and where he wants to bring about healing. And then sometimes if I'm really still just like jumbled up in my head, I used to be a runner, and running was like so helpful in processing. I mean, how many times did I say to you, I don't want to talk about it until after I've gone on a run?
Yeah.
And there's actually like neuroscience behind that of you're basically doing EMDR with the bilateral movement. For me, walking doesn't really do it. Running is really the only thing that does it. And it would bring me all this clarity of mind, and God would speak, and I can't run anymore, and I journal a lot more. So I'm trying to embrace walking. Went on a walk this morning. I did not enjoy it.
What if you walked faster? I haven't asked this question.
I walk really fast.
Are you like an old lady power walker? We don't often walk
trying
together.
To get the runner's high, which cannot be attained in a walk. Can't happen. I'm trying though. I'm trying to like that space. I hear that walking brings a lot of mental clarity for a lot of people. I just have yet to receive that benefit.
I do some of my best thinking. I always get a little concerned when people say that I have my best thinking about in the shower, or that's not a bad thing. But when they say I was in the shower and I was thinking about you, I'm always like, let's rephrase this whole thing. What? Especially when it's the dudes I work with. I'm always like, let's start over.
Maybe just say I had a moment of quiet and I thought about you.
It doesn't matter where you get clear thinking, just get it. I think that's the point. Shower, run, walk, wherever it is. So invite Jesus into the wound in whatever ways that make sense to you. I think as a father, for me personally, it is slowing down as well. I also think talking about it helps. I verbally process a lot. Yeah. So fourthly, and we'll be done and just have a couple of encouragements. It's important to practice new patterns. So you're not broken, you're patterned. If you learn your pattern through the story, you grieve the fact that it wasn't there. You invite Jesus into it. When you start practicing a new pattern, that is what will begin to form. Now, it's so funny because with all of this information that we have in the world, I feel like some of us, myself included, can still sometimes just ignore some of the things that are right now just becoming common language. Like, you are your habits. We know this. There's so many wonderful resources out there. Even like habits of the household. Justin did a great job of breaking down habit formation, but habits really are what help you become the person that you are. And the habits you pick really matter. And so it's important to practice new patterns. Even give yourself a little goal. My habit this week is when my wife says this thing that often triggers me, I'm going to know the story. I'm going to grieve the fact that still hurts, and I'm inviting Jesus into it. And when she does that, I'm going to do my best to respond differently. Just even once. That's my goal this week. My habit, and I want to make it a habit to try at least once a week or twice a week. That's what we have to do. And there's so many ways, a myriad of ways in which you can start to apply that. But wherever the pain is, if it's over responding to your kids, Ask for the power of the Holy Spirit to help you hold your tongue the next time. Now, again, procedural memory is really tricky, and a lot of the times it's automated responses, and I know that better than anybody personally. So sometimes it's a burden to say, hey, just try not to. You're like, I know what I'm asking. I know it's not just that simple. But I think you can actually do things like the next time I get really angry and the next time I get really overwhelmed, I'm going to just remove myself. I'm going on a walk and I'm going to tell my spouse, this is what I'm going to do. Like, we're going to agree upon that.
Well, that right there. I'm going to tell my spouse, this is what I'm going to do. I was just thinking of the scripture that says, confess your sins one to another so that you may be healed. And we're talking about healing. How do we heal from this? And I think if you can, in the context of a healthy relationship, whether that's a marriage or a close friendship or a close family member, if it's healthy and it's safe, when you can let somebody into some of these things, hey, I recognize I have this pattern. I really don't want to keep responding this way. I want to try this new thing. And I'm inviting the Spirit in. I want God to redeem this part of me, to heal this part of me that is currently broken. You know, the title of this episode, I think it will be, You're Not Broken, Your Pattern. I think the reality is maybe a better title is, We Don't Have to Stay Broken. We are broken people, but God is in the business of healing constantly all the time. We are being healed. We are being transformed. That is the reality of walking with Jesus. And there is a healing that happens when we say it out loud to somebody who loves us. I mean, there is healing. That is literally what that verse means. And oftentimes I think, at least for me, I would hear that verse and be like, oh my gosh, I have to confess all my deep, dark secrets, and we're afraid of shame, so we just don't tell anybody. But what if that looked like the example you were saying? You telling me, I don't want to respond in an angry way. So next time I'm feeling really overwhelmed by anger, I'm going to leave and go on a walk. What if that's what that confession is, part of what that looks like?
It's part of it.
Of you saying, it's not the whole, but saying out loud. Because if we stay, okay, let's use another example. I talked about this on the podcast before. I definitely struggle with addiction to my phone. And it's not how I want to behave, but it's now how I'm patterned to behave. And for me, letting somebody else into that, my friend Nicole, I love you, Nicole, letting her into, I'm looking at my phone way too much. Like just saying out loud, when we were able to say it out loud to each other, you have instant accountability. I was instantly met with, me too, what are we going to do about it?
I'm sure Nicole loves it. You just outed her too.
Well, I'm just kidding. We're working on it together. I did just get, although I keep forgetting to use it.
Yeah, by the way, I haven't seen you touch that thing once.
I have. It's actually been great.
One time?
It's called Brick.
We're not sponsored by this, by the way.
No, but it's amazing.
But I know that you
literally just tap your phone on it and it locks you out of everything. It's amazing. I'm just still forming the pattern to remember to go tap my phone on it.
I think you need to move it from the side of the fridge to the front of the fridge.
I probably do.
I think it's a visual cue.
Yeah.
That's my guess.
Confessing to someone else really does bring healing.
Yes. It's been a busy work week and we were talking and you're like, whoa, is this what it feels like to be distracted? We were sitting down last night to talk and I was a lot of different moving parts right now. And you're like, is this what it feels like sometimes on the opposite?
To talk to me?
Yeah. Like talking to you with my phone in front of my face. Yeah, I got it. Mm-hmm. You're not broken, you're patterned. 3 things to take with you as we go. A reflection, a question, and a prayer. So first, reflection. Reflect on one pattern that shows up often in your parenting, your marriages, or your friendships. What's one pattern? I promise you know, because the people that love you are experiencing it all the time. And if you need help, graciously and humbly ask them, let them respond fully. Mm-hmm. Find that one thing, ask a question. Here's the question. What is that pattern protecting you from? And what is it trying to say? What is it protecting you from? That big response. Is it protecting you from feeling someone else's feelings too much? Like if someone else is dysregulated, it dysregulates you and you don't like what that feels like. So you shut them down in order for you to not have to feel. I don't know how I know that so well. And I couldn't say that so quickly, but ask that question. And then last, pray. Simply just pray. Ask Jesus to help you be curious and kind towards your story. Those 2 things, curiosity and kindness, are the posture of Jesus. The more I read the scriptures, the more I know you do as well, Elizabeth. Jesus was kind and he was curious. He was not damning and shaming. But that's the rap that a lot of religious people have given him. He is curious and he doesn't shame us into compliance. He loves us into it. And so wherever you're at, reflect on that pattern, ask what it's trying to protect you from, and pray for Jesus to help you be curious about it, because you are not broken, you're patterned, and healing is totally possible. So bless you as you're on this journey in your marriage and in your parenting.